Okay, well, welcome everybody. Whoa, Heather's gone. Welcome everybody to our Saturday to our Saturday tasting. Oh boy, we're having a lot of fun. I hope you are too. I hope there's somebody out there. We're on YouTube today, as you know. If you're seeing us, we've had some challenges with keeping stream consistency on Facebook, so we've moved over here, hoping it'll work a little bit better for us and for you. Today we have some great wines, Gewurztraminer. Our planned wines were the 2010 and 2011 Gewurztraminer, both from Curry Creek Vineyard. We've had a great response to this tasting. So the 2011, which we only had a few cases of, is gone. In fact, some of you probably didn't get it. So we kind of released the 2015 as kind of a substitute. So we're going to end up tasting and talking about all three of those wines tonight in some fashion. Not all of us have all three, but some of us, or all of us, have at least a couple. So anyway, Gewurztraminer. Why would somebody want to taste and drink Gewurztraminer? This is going to be a question and answer session. That's my question. Who has an answer?
Because it's delicious.
That's right. 2 points for Rebecca.
Hey, I'm still working on figuring out YouTube here. I got it. Okay, I'm on it. Got it.
Yeah, well, Gewurztraminer is delicious, and I've been quite a fan of Gewurz for most of my life, literally. So back in my first winemaking job in the Finger Lakes was in 1988. And believe it or not, I made Gewurz that year. There wasn't much Gewurz around, but McGregor Vineyards had, I think 2 blocks of Gewurz, maybe totally in a couple acres. And Gewurz had been part of their lineup for a number of years. Bob McGregor was quite a pioneer, and not as famous as some of the early pioneers, but he took the approach of saying, well, people say I should be planting hybrids, but I'm going to plant these because I think it'll work. So in addition to Gewurztraminer, the farm also had several of northern Eastern European varieties, Syrexia and Separavi, and a Syrexia Rosé, I think, a number of kind of bizarre wines or varieties, and Gewurztraminer. So I felt myself very fortunate to have that early experience with Gewurztraminer. And so here we are today, 20 or 30 years later, drinking Gewurz. So in addition to being delicious, I'm going to say Gewurz is nearly timeless. So cheers to the Gewurz.
Cheers.
Anyway, for those of you who arrived here, if anybody's out there, I see 2 people are watching. Hi, 1 and 2. You expected us to be talking about wine, so we are. Which one are we tasting first? The 2011?
2011.
The 2011 Gewurz. So 2011 was a pretty moist year, and a lot of botrytis in the vineyards in general, and pretty cool. But the vineyard where we get this is Curry Creek Vineyards. John Santos is the grower, and he is one of the most skilled and excellent growers anywhere. And his fruit is always spectacularly ripe and clean and delicious. So even in a year like 2011, where it was really rainy, we had great fruit to work with. So yeah, who has something to say about this 2011?
I mean, being able to bottle a single vineyard anything in 2011 was relatively rare, outside of maybe dessert selections with all the botrytis. So I think that speaks volumes to this vineyard. And it's a beautiful vineyard. It's a quirky vineyard, right? Like, I mean, John Santos is a pretty big guy. I mean, in terms of he's pretty tall, and those vines are massive. Like the fruiting zone is at like eye level for me. It's crazy. But I think in a wet year, it serves him well, right? Like he's got all of this potential for canopy and green growth to almost restrain or harness that moisture and the vigor that comes with it. And as a result, you get cleaner fruit, or you have the chance to hang fruit longer than you would typically. There's a lot of competition in that vineyard. He's a fan of green growth in between the rows, and that helps soak up moisture. so the wine has just been aging beautifully. You know, nice, like it's always had a really nice beeswax and honey note to it. It's always been a little bit more restrained of a Gewurztraminer as well. You know, it's not like that screaming tropical lychee that we get in other vintages, but it was, you know, it was a little bit cloudier and not cooler, but not as much sun exposure over here.
Yeah. Excellent. What about the balance on this wine?
One of the things that I've always loved about the 2011, and especially for Gewurztraminers that we do in general, is the fact that they have a really nice complexity to them. And they tend to also be, especially when they're younger, a little bit lighter in the mouth. So the 11 is really easy for a lot of people who don't want overly floral or big fat Gewurzes. This one's pretty light and delicate. And so it goes with a myriad of different dishes, and not just traditional Thanksgiving and spicy foods. You can have this with cheese easily for just like a light snack. You can have it with some nice savory salads. And because of that delicate nature, it's a much more user-friendly, and it's easier to pull out and have with a dish rather than really thinking seriously about, okay, I'm having a Gewurz. It's a big Gewurz. You know, what do I have it with? It's easier to just pull this out and say, oh, I can actually have a glass of Gewurz, and this is that Gewurz.
Yeah. You know, it just occurred to me, we probably should talk a little bit about the sort of our approach or philosophy about to making Gewurztraminer. And, you know, Gewurz is kind of a magical, I think it's a magical grape variety. And in some ways it sort of bends the winemaker's mind, and leaves them somewhere suspended between red and white winemaking. You know, if you think about in very simple terms, you think about white wines, let's say a simple fruit-driven Riesling. Though we know Riesling is much more complex than this, but think of something pretty simple and fruity. It's basically juice. You get nice juice that's really fruity tasting, has acid, has some sugar, and there's wine. And then you take sort of the framework of a big red wine is not just the juice and sugar and alcohol and acid. It has all this other stuff that make the wine red, tannins and, you know, anthocyanins and all these things that are astringent and textural and blah, 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 blah. And that, for the most part, all comes from the skins. Gewurztraminer, so much of the structure and character of Gewurztraminer comes from the skins, much like you would expect in a red wine, but it's white. So in order to make a Gewurz that has what you really want, you need to extract stuff. There's that technical term, stuff, from the skins. And the way that's accomplished is not typically not by fermenting the skins like you would have red, but our kind of, I don't want to call it formula, but it really is. Our formula is use a few techniques and then keep these techniques sort of customized to the vintage in a very nimble way. So we pick the fruit very ripe to start with, because most of these really complex, beautiful flavors, like we talk about lychee, and we talk about watermelon and honeydew, and really dark red watermelon. Those things occur once the grapes are quite mature. And if you pick the grapes too early, they're just not there. And then they're crushed, and we pick these grapes very cold in the morning. Usually they're almost always, in fact, without exception, they're machine harvested. And actually, I'll post a video later of one of the harvests, like 2009 maybe, or 2010. But they're picked before daylight in October, so it's liable to be just above, in the 30s maybe, or 40 degrees. We pick a particularly cold day to do this, so that the fruit comes in very cold, and it's crushed and put into bins with sulfur and dry ice to keep it saturated with CO2, and then it sits there. And sometimes it doesn't just sit there, but it stays on the skins for a couple days, 3 days, 4 days. It depends on the vintage, it depends on the fruit, it depends on the condition. And then it's sort of pressed off and handled a little bit more like a white wine, but extensive skin contact, really ripe fruit. That's kind of the basic approach to making, I think, great Gewurztraminer.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Kelby?
I would agree. I mean, that's actually a perfect segue to the 2010, if anyone has that to move into, because
Yeah.
2010 really exemplifies, I think, the Red Newt expression of Gewurztraminer. In a way that is perhaps a little avant-garde or a little controversial for some people. There's a lot of opinions on, I like to call Gewurztraminer the white Pinot Noir, because the thing with Pinot Noir, there's a couple things with Pinot Noir. One, it likes to rot in the vineyard. It's a really difficult grape to work with. And Gewurztraminer doesn't necessarily like to rot, but boy, yellow jackets really like to eat Gewurztraminer grapes, and birds like to eat Gewurztraminer grapes. And once they start getting ripe, they start getting hammered by those things, and you're at risk of disease pressure. So it's a bit finicky there. And then the other thing that's similar between Pinot and Gewurz is that everyone has a different opinion of what the correct style of that wine is. I've done Pinot Noir tastings with winemaking groups, and people fight like cats and dogs over a wine based on whether they like the style or not. And Gewurz is similar. And part of it comes down to how much acid do you want? Do you want it to be like a refreshing, bright white wine necessarily? Which means picking earlier to retain that flavor potential.
I'm sorry. You did the Darth Vader again.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it was more like R2D2 because you kind of went up a couple levels.
No, it's everyone trying to connect here. The 2010, I think, really leans into our style, which is not to try and pick early to preserve acid, but to really embrace the fact that Gewurztraminer should be this really unctuous, rich, beautiful, aromatic, and truly oily expression, right? That's not to everyone's taste, but Gewurztraminer isn't for everyone. And this wine hits that in spades. I mean, the numbers on it are wild to read as well. The chemistries in terms of sugar and alcohol, you would think it's a dessert wine looking at them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we
that's
are
where. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So we're out of stock. I just want clarity on the 11, but the 10 is available.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
We have
And
100 bottles of it.
100 bottles. Okay, great. And it's about 25 retail. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
24.
6 bottles and free shipping.
That's true.
Mhm.
You spend less getting 6 bottles of wine from us than you spend in gas if you have to drive more than a block to the store. No, I haven't had this 2010 in a while. It's really beautiful. And it reminds me, you're talking about the bizarre numbers with Gewurztraminer. There's this, that's what I wanted to talk to you. There's this like sort of 4-way balance. In a simple white wine, the balance is acid, sugar, right? Pretty much. And fruitiness and other stuff kind of impacts it. With Gewurz, it has this balance between, acid and sugar, phenolics, bitterness, astringency, and alcohol, because alcohols are usually ample. And all four of those things create sort of 4-way balance and synergy. And if you sort of diagram these and how they impact each other and cancel each other out and reinforce the sort of the perception of each other, it's a really bizarre kind of complex framework to work within. That's probably why I like it so much, because I like bizarre, complex things.
It's also a style that is meant for aging. I would say, I think the first couple of vintages at Red Newt that I made Gewurz, I remember bringing them to the winemakers tasting group soon after, either right before they were bottled or right after, and they just didn't show that well. It's almost like a style that wants time in bottle to really evolve and open up, and to really reach its balance point, right? Like it's there are styles of Gewurz that are very showy and want to go right into someone's glass, and there are styles that like this one is 10 years old and is still drinking super young and is still just opening up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always think of, oh, go ahead.
Go
honey.
ahead. No,
Uh,
you.
So I always think of Gewurz as either being that really, nice kind of delicate style. It's easy to drink. There's quite a few of those out there in the market right now. And then there's that style of Gewurz that just screams, I am Gewurz. I'm big, I'm fat, I'm happy. And I always think of Red Newt style as kind of always trying to pick between the two. And 2010 is the serious big boy that just says, I'm Gewurz and I'm not making any bones about it. Which is probably why I love it so much for Thanksgiving. And also because our Gewurz tends to be a bit higher in booze than most people's. We tend to kind of push the envelope at around, well, we typically average 13.7 on our Gewurz. And I think the 2010 is 15.1. So it's, great for the holidays. You get your turkey, you have your Gewurz, and you're out before the first quarter is over. So there's no hope.
Yeah.
And depending on the family, you're taking a nap in your chair.
Yeah, that's, the alcohol is a kind of a tricky thing. I mean, with Gewurz, it's all about flavor. And in the vineyard and picking. Oh, shall I talk about who wants to talk about our flavor maturity progression scale that we latch onto for Gewurztraminer like year after year?
I say that's Meg's.
Sure. I've never fully actually been part of the conversation. I'm your tertiary individual. But if I am correct, it's kind of like a watermelon, and you're working from the rind in actually as you're going through flavor maturity. So kind of a little bit, towards that kind of green, obviously awful part. No one actually eats the rind of a watermelon. If you do, all right, that's weird, but that's fine.
Good pickle.
In a little bit, you kind of get into that little, white section, which is a little bit bitter, and there's not a lot going on there. It just kind of is. And then you move further into the watermelon, you get into the kind of that cusp where the white and the red are meeting, which would be pink. And you're starting to get some nice flavor, and then you get deep into the watermelon with that super juicy, flavorful, like red profile. And that's where we're looking to find Gewurztraminer in the vineyards.
Yeah. And sometimes that it achieves that maturity when it's 24, 25, 26 bricks. We have to cut it with water so it fits on so our hydrometer works because without a scale. But it's again driven by flavor. Yep.
I would also give a shout out to Peter Bells, the winemaker at Fox Run. His description for Gewurztraminers that are picked maybe just past the rind of the watermelon point, like when you first get that flush of flavor in the vineyard. He describes the wines that result from that as tasting like dentine ice, which is, I don't know if it's brilliant or terrible, because I never thought of those wines that way until I had that metric in my head, and it's ruined so many Gewurztraminers for me ever since.
Yeah, I mean, there's, Gewurztraminer, one thing that happens as it matures is the acid drops rather precipitously. So when we're picking these wines, the TA, whereas, to give you a reference for numbers, the TA for Riesling might be between 8-10 grams per liter when we harvest. Red wines might be in that 4 to 7, 5, 6, 7, something like that. Well, often the Gewurztraminer is down around 4 grams per liter of titratable acidity, and a pH up, in 3.6, 3.7 sometimes. So it's easy, sort of this from a strategic standpoint of looking at the grapes and saying, well, my gosh, that's the acids, I'm losing the acid. And if I want a wine that's vibrant and fresh and alive, I'd better pick it before the acid disappears. So some people do that, but that's not the way I look at it, or we look at it. We look at it as, again, a sort of an issue of flavor development. And if you concentrate on these sort of nuts and bolts of, singular idea of having enough acid and ignore the requirement of flavor development, you end up in a lurch. Mm-hmm. And also because these other elements of the wine, the textural astringents, the phenolic elements, and the alcohol impact the way you perceive, I think, the stability of wine, but also impact the way you perceive these things. You don't actually need tons of acid. In fact, if the acid's too high with alcohol and with those phenolics, the wine is just way too aggressive. So it's kind of if you have those other components at a higher level, you need softer acidity in order for it not to be just plain over the top and aggressive.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
it really brings in a good point that winemaking is not just about following numbers and following chemistries. So much of what we're doing, especially getting ready for harvest, is yes, we look at that absolutely, but we're in the vineyard and we're tasting the grapes on a regular basis. And really that's going to drive our decision about picking more than anything else, because in the end, if the grapes are tasting correct, then we know that the resulting wine has a lot of potential as well.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, this is delicious. I'm really glad we're tasting and talking about the 2010 tonight, because it's really delicious. Just and flavorful and beautifully aged. And yeah, somebody mentioned 1% alcohol, which is a lot. And it was, I think 5 years ago, it poked out a little bit, but tonight, boy, it's so beautifully integrated and seamless. It's really amazing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, what else? Yeah.
I was going to say, I have to give a quick nod to one of my favorite anecdotes from when I started at Red Newt and started to move into the lab, which was the lab was, we'd shifted over to computer record keeping at that point. So there was a lot of old paperwork to sift through. And I remember organizing the desk and stumbling upon a report, like onion skin paper typed out. I want to say it was like 1990 or 1991 from Dave, a report or a presentation he was giving on the potential suitability of Gewurztraminer to the Finger Lakes, which is just one of my favorite little tidbits. Red Newt's always been known for Gewurz. There's, that's been a calling card for us, and I think it's a real feather in Dave's cap that he was on that right from the start. I mean, that's really something else.
Yeah, I was going to ask who was first planting this, and how much of the Finger Lakes is dedicated to Gewurztraminer?
Well, the very first block of Gewurz was a test block planted by Gold Seal, 1973, Dave, somewhere between like 70 and 73.
Thereabouts up near Standing Stone.
Yeah, and they still own that block. They still own that block of grapes, and they still harvest it and make Gewurz out of it.
Yeah.
But so who else made Gewurz? I know Prejean did.
Well, Ed Grow at Rolling Vineyards, and I don't know whether Ed planted those grapes or whether Bill Moffat had planted those grapes previously. I'm not sure, but that was that was a mature vineyard back in the mid 80s. So that was probably early 80s or late 70s that was planted. And I believe, I don't know if it's true, a lot of budwoods has come out of that vineyard. I know that the Standing Stone farm, some of the original plantings there came from budwood from Ed Grow's farm, and who knows where that came from, probably Amberg's nursery or somewhere. In fact, a couple of the early vintages of Standing Stone came from the Ed Grow's fruit too. I made those. But Bob McGregor opened his winery in 84, I believe. And I'm guessing he was planting Gewurz right around 1980 and maybe the early 70s. I'm not sure of the history of when he started the vineyards, but he was really early on the scene, Gewurztraminer too. And Prejean was growing Gewurztraminer back in sort of mid 80s. I think that was part of their original plantings when they started. When did they start? They started in the mid 80s.
It was the mid 80s, because I can remember by the late 90s, they were the first winery that ever produced 2 Gewurztraminers every single year. And I was astounded by that, because, most of us know in retail that Gewurz can be a tough sell because it's such a unique grape. If you love it, you love it. And if you don't, well, then you don't. It's like opera. There's other stuff out there. But I was always amazed that they had enough belief in their Gewurzes that they need 2 every vintage. And both of them delicious.
And to your question, Rebecca, there's not, there's a reasonable amount of Gewurz in the Finger Lakes, but there's not a ton of it. I mean, it's very much a minority vinifera white grape.
Pink grape.
Yes.
Ruby. Yeah. All right. Well, that was fun. And I think let's wrap it up before we get too silly. And and oh yeah, of course, the way we usually wrap this up is thinking about dinner. So who has a burning desire to share something really delicious, what they're going to have for dinner tonight? How about you, Rebecca? Oh, you, Megs.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this all week, actually. I've been very excited about Gewurztraminer. So I'm doing a Thai rice soup with like pork cilantro meatballs, but you cook it so long that the rice starts breaking down, so it's almost more of a porridge. And then you cook, you actually kind of drop the meatballs in and they cook in the soup. But the thing that's most exciting about this is when you're ready to go, you have your bowl and you crack a raw egg into it, and then you ladle the soup on top, and the soup will actually cook the egg that way. And then when you actually go to dig into the soup, you kind of break the egg yolk and it like makes this big, creamy, rich broth. So very excited about this.
Oh, okay.
Have you made that before, Mags? Have you made that porridge before? You are in for a treat.
What do you have in the kitchen, Heather?
So today I'm doing shaved red and white cabbage with shaved Brussels sprouts. We're going to add some peppers and some onions and some mushrooms in there. And I'm going to do sort of a ginger and sesame stir fry.
Cool. How about you, Kelby?
Well, I cannot lie. It's a beautiful day here in the Finger Lakes, so we're going to do hot dogs. Which will not necessarily pair with. That'll be more beer probably. But as I speak, Julia is working on a cardamom version of snickerdoodles. Seems ideally suited for Gewurztraminer.
I'd say so. Just throw some trout on the dog, it'll be good.
How about you, Rebecca?
We're having Indian tonight. I drove into Rochester to Namaste this morning, and I picked up some chaat, which is Indian appetizers, and then I'm cooking a chicken tikka masala with peas pulao rice.
Nice.
Lots and lots of spice. I think it'll be great with this wine.
Yeah. Well, we ventured out to the farmer's market this morning and picked up some, well, what did we find there? We found some beautiful mushrooms, and we found some beautiful chard, and I picked up my first couple bunches of ramps from a farmer there. So I think, and then we stopped and got a really pretty piece of cod at the grocery store. So I think there's going to be some ramps and beans and greens and sort of broiled cod to go with this Gewurz tonight.
Very nice.
One of our guests chimed in. It's Mary Bigelow. They're down in Pennsylvania enjoying Gewurztraminer with us. She goes, we're going to do it turkey chili style.
Right.
I think turkey chili and Gewurz going to go great.
All right. Well, it's been fun. I hope everybody's had fun, including the people that have stuck it out and joined us for this weekly event. And what do I have to say? Of course, you can get this wine in Winestem for next week's tasting. In fact, the reason my eyes look like this is because I spent all afternoon upgrading our commerce site on the website. So it's easier to find these wines and easier to buy them and have us send them to you. So shameless plug, check out the website and enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon. If you're watching live, and hopefully it's beautiful where you are too, because it's beautiful here, sunny and warm. And thank you all, and cheers.
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 Bye-bye.